Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to this short webinar where we will focus on the history of Ayurveda and the origin on major textual sources. So, if you look at Ayurveda, Ayurveda is made of the two words Ayus and Veda, meaning life and knowledge. So, we can say that Ayurveda is, the knowledge of life. We don't know really when Ayurveda emerged. It's many, many thousands of years old. So we can assume that it is perhaps even as old as 5,000 years, at least its origins, because even 3,000 years ago, it is presented as a full-fledged system. So there must have been a time when it evolved. So our timeline is around 5,000 years. So Ayurveda, one of the key features is that it looks at the human being as a complete whole, body, mind, and spirit. And it looks at health, lifestyle, and also medicine, all these things together. So it's one of the oldest holistic approaches to health. So if you look at the origins of Ayurveda, we cannot travel back into time because 5,000 years is quite far away. So the origins we do not know. That is the first thing I want to say. We don't know when and where Ayurveda originated, and we cannot see through the mist of time. So here is when you look at the history of Ayurveda, we have two narratives. One is the mythological narrative, where we talk about it is most likely that we consider this as a religious narrative because we have many gods or superhuman beings to whom we are tracing the origin of Ayurveda, like Brahma, who has four faces, Daksha Prajapati, then Ashwini Kumaras, then it came to Indra, and from Indra it came to the human. So the story is that Ayurveda has a divine origin. It originated from superhuman forces in nature, and then through Indra it came to the human being. So these kind of narrative you can see in most of the Ayurvedic texts, and for this reason many people also say that Ayurveda is religious. So this we must understand in context. It is very symbolic. See, when you talk about Brahma, Brahma means, the creator of the universe, which means what the text is telling is that the knowledge of Ayurveda is inherent in nature. So to show that Ayurveda is natural knowledge, that is why they have used this imagery. So Brahma means four-headed, means complete awareness. So which means that the knowledge of Ayurveda is in the plants, it is in the animals, it is in nature itself. That is why the whole nature is functioning as a, uh, coherent, harmonized whole, because this knowledge of Ayurveda is in nature. So from that point of view, the knowledge of Ayurveda already existed in nature. But humans have to discover it. That is the idea behind this mythological story. So when you have a deep connection with nature, when you connect to these devatas, devatas are just the forces in nature. So when you connect to these devatas, you will get the knowledge of Ayurveda. So today, a scientist, where is the knowledge of Ayurveda? It is in the living beings. So we can learn about Ayurveda through a very rich literature, especially in Sanskrit, but it is also available in Vedic. And it in the Indian medical. So how do we learn about Ayurveda today? The primary sources are there, which are the classical literature. They are preserved as manuscripts. So these manuscripts, thousands and thousands of manuscripts are there, kept in private and public collections and libraries. And many of them still need to be properly documented and studied. And so Sanskrit language boasts of one of the richest medical literature in the world. So it's enormous. And not only in India, many of these manuscripts are also preserved in other parts. So we continue, as I was mentioning, this literature is very rich, and What is fascinating is that if you want today to study about the Ayurvedic Sanskrit literature, we have to go to the work of a Dutch scholar whose name is Professor Gerrit Jan Muhlenbeld, and he has done the most comprehensive documentation of Indian medical literature. So, this work is a unique survey of traditional Indian medical literature. It has been the effort of a scholarly lifetime of reading texts. I remember in the 1990s, I visited the home of Muhlenbeld in I think it was in yes, it's in Groningen in the Netherlands, and he received me at his home, and I saw his beautiful library. And in those days, when computers were still not widely available, Muhlenbeld was making notes on papers, on cards, indexing without the help of any computing. So it is a painstaking effort of decades of hard work by the scholar that today is available in the form of the book History of Indian Medical Literature. This is published from Netherlands, and it is a 5-volume book. And if you read this book, you will get a very fascinating idea, very authentic, information on the various texts, the various teachers, their dates, the content, how Indian medical literature evolved through the centuries. What we find from this narrative of scholars like Muhlenbeld, and I would like to read out this slide. And while all periods, if you look at the evolution of Ayurveda, while all periods produce unique and important works, it's particularly fascinating to see that the rate of literary production in no way diminished in the later periods, which means we have a tradition which was continuously creating new medical literature. So authors in the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries produced a rich and important crop of diverse medical treatises, often describing new diseases, new theories, new treatments, and new medicines. These facts decisively contradict the two common opinions that post-classical Indian medicine was static and unchanging, and that medical creativity entered a dark age after Vagpada. So this is a great historian, Dominic Vujastic, is pointing out that Indian medicine has always been dynamic and changing, evolving, unlike what many people tend to believe.
Hmm.
So, this is what we learn, and I would like to uh, quickly take you through some examples of to show this richness and evolutionary trend of Ayurveda. And this is very important today because it means that when you say classical Ayurveda, it does not have to be old Ayurveda. Ayurveda was renewing itself, it was becoming updated. So the future is also updation and expansion of Ayurveda. As I said, we have two narratives. The mythological origin is on the one side, and the historical evolution. So the mythological origin should not be found as contradictory to the uh, historical narrative, because the mythological origin is only telling us that Ayurveda can be discovered. Especially in olden days, they used to do meditation, higher practices, connecting with nature. So there, anytime, any point of time, Ayurveda can be rediscovered when we connect with nature, when we study nature. And through this process, Ayurveda has been evolving repeatedly. So we have a historical narrative which is also not very detailed and very accurate as we go into the olden times, because the origin of Ayurveda is very old. But the mythological origin tells us that even if we lose Ayurveda, we can again rediscover it by connecting to nature. So, this is a diagrammatic idea to show how Ayurveda has evolved historically. Um, so, again, to go back, so please don't think, because the historical mythological narrative are a bit contradictory. A lot of people, because of the mythological narrative, think that everything in Ayurveda is final and we cannot question it. It has come from Brahma, and it will be the same as it was at the time it was created. No further progress is possible. That is why I am giving the historical narrative. Historical narrative shows that Ayurveda has always progressed. So, because Brahma remembered it doesn't mean that everybody was following blindly, the no, the tradition of Ayurveda without questioning, without adding no. So that is the point that I wanted to convey through this discussion, and I will look at this diagram after the translation. And what you're seeing here is the chronogeographical spread. You can see the map of India, and you can see some labels here. Ayurvedic textbooks from Jammu Kashmir to Kanyakumari to Sri Lanka. From every part of the country, always some contribution has been made for the development of Ayurveda. If we were to put all the textbooks that are available onto the map of India, we will not be able to see the map. So it is a pan-Indian, universal. It's not one person's opinion. The whole country has participated. And if you look at the timeline here in the cross section of a tree, the annular rings representing evolution, you can see that Ayurveda has continuously evolved. New literature has been continuously created. Then you can see here names of great acharyas. It is good to know. Bharadwaj, Agastya, Agnivesha, Bhela, Sushruta, Bhava Mishra, Dhanvantari, Atreya, Charaka, Kashyapa, Vagbhada, Madhava, each of them contributing in a unique way. To just give a few examples, Agastya, Siddha Medicine, Agnivesha, first textbook. Bhela, new ideas of the mind, heart, circulation. Sushruta, surgeon. Madhava, diagnostician, Kashyapa, pediatrician, and so on. So if you look at Mueller-Pelt's book, you can see hundreds and thousands of such names and their unique contributions to the development of Ayurveda. So you can see various textbooks. Ayurvedic is a little busy slide. So textbooks are very structured. Like today, when we have to do a research writing, you have to follow certain structures. So here you can see Samhitas, Nikhandus, Sutras, Koshas, Vyakhyas, Yoga Sangrahas, So all Ayurvedic textbooks are not similar. For a particular type of writing, there is a particular type of structure. So you can see this is an early example of specific formats for technical writing. So what has happened in Ayurveda, another thing which we have to understand is that for a long time, there were no written material. Everything was transmitted orally. This is one of the intangible heritages. Oral transmission is a very powerful way of preserving knowledge in India. And it was much, much later that we started writing, on manuscripts. So one good thing was when a lot of invasions happened and many manuscripts were destroyed in India, the Pandits actually rewrote all the books from memory. So because of the oral transmission, a lot of this knowledge could be preserved. Okay, so there is a question that the titles of the textbooks are difficult. See, this is only a symbolic slide. I am going to explain the titles separately. This is just to show that books were initially in oral form, later became written. All the name of the text I will show in the coming slides. Yeah. So as Ayurveda evolved, there are also 8 branches that developed. This also shows that Ayurveda became specialized very early. So you can see 3,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, we had Kaya Chikitsa, Bala Chikitsa, Bhuta Vidya, Shalakya Tantra, Shalya Tantra, Visha Chikitsa, Rasayana, Vajagarana. Later, they all subspecialized into. So we had internal medicine, pediatrics, psychiatry, ENT, dentistry, ophthalmology, surgery, toxicology, immunity and aging, treatment, reproductive medicine. So imagine 3,000 years ago specialization. This is very fascinating. So that's about the thing. Now somebody has asked about dates. It's very difficult to completely give the exact dates of the Samhitas, but I'm going to give some indicative dates. So if you look at the origin of Ayurveda, you can say it goes back to Vedic period, which is 1500 before the Common Era to 500 Common Era. In this period, we can see in Rig Veda, Atharva Veda, many discussions about health, herbs, diseases, healing practices. All these got systematized in the later period. So in the Samhita period. So, see, we cannot give an exact date between 600 BCE and 300 CE. So, Charaka Samhita has evolved in such a long period. It may have originated around 600 BCE, but its current form, it took another 700 years to reach its current stage, 900, almost 1000 years. So by 300 common era, that is AD, it has reached. So Charaka, Sushruta, Vagbhada, then this concept of dosha, dhatu, malas, then the inclusion of philosophical systems like Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, all this happened in this time period. We can only give a broad outline. Then we have the three texts. So the Charaka Samhita reached its current shape. That is what we can say. The present form of Charaka Samhita was completed in the 100 AD. That is first century CE when Dridhabala completed it. But it originated more than 1000 years ago. That is the problem when we try to give a date for Charaka Samhita. It is complete, compiled, edited, modified over 1000 years. So it is dealing with internal medicine. Sushruta Samhita also first to second century, it reached its completion, current stage, surgery and anatomy. Ashtanga Hridaya, the 6th to 7th century, and it is more holistic, synthesizing both Charaka and Sushruta together. So Charaka Samhita, you can say it was first written by Agnivesha, then it was revised by Charaka, enlarged by Charaka and revised by Dridhabala. It is having diagnosis, pathology, medicinal therapies, very good philosophical grounding and ethical principles are discussed. The Sushruta Samhita, first written by Sushruta, but then later Nagarjuna has revised it. So it has surgery, anatomy, instruments, and then body dissection, practical training, all these things are discussed. So Ashtanga Hridaya and Ashtanga Sangraha, two books composed by Vagbhada. Some people say they are two different Vagbhadas. It was written in 6th to 17th century. Ashtanga Sangraha and Ashtanga Sangraha has both prose and poem. Ashtanga Hridaya is fully poetry. And it is a synthesis of Charaka and Sushruta, especially focusing on lifestyle, daily routines, clinical practice. So many other Ayurvedic texts were also created. Kashyapa Samhita in the 6th century or earlier. Bhela Samhita 6th to 7th century in the Common Era. Harita Samhita 6th to 8th century. Then we have Kerala traditions which talked about Panchakarma formulation. So these are some of the major textbooks of Ayurveda. So we have two schools of Ayurveda, the surgical school called Dhanvantariya Sampradaya and medical school called Atreya Sampradaya. And it is fascinating to see that perhaps the first World Health Assembly was held in the Himalayas. Charaka Samhita talks about how all the sages from all parts of the world came together and discussed about the health of humanity. So it's fascinating that Charaka Samhita actually is the note of a student because it was first written by Agnivesha, who was the disciple of Atreya. So you can see in those days they gave so much of empowerment to the student. The textbook was not in the name of the teacher, but in the name of the student. So Sushruta Samhita is also like that. Dhanvantari was the teacher, Sushruta was the student. So all these major Ayurvedic textbooks were composed by the students of the great teachers. So this shows student empowerment in learning. Kashyapa is a pediatric school. This is one of the earliest textbooks on pediatrics. It's also known as Vriddha Jivaka Tantra. So here again, another name of the book is after the student who actually compiled this textbook. So it was common in those days to make students to write the textbooks. So later period, just like the Charaka, Sushruta, Vagbhada came to be known as the Brihatrayi, we have in the later period three other books known as Lakhutrayi or the Lesser Triad. These are the works of Madhava, 7th to 8th century CE, Sarngadhara Samhita, 13th century CE, and Bhava Prakasha, 16th century CE. Madhava Nidana focused on diagnostic, Sharngadhara Samhita on formulations and pulse diagnosis, and Bhava Prakasha on, it's like an encyclopedic work. So these three became the later three important textbooks of Ayurveda. Then we have Nikhandus. At one point, right from the 9th to 10th century in the Common Era or AD, we see a lot of textbooks being created which are dealing with medicinal plants and their properties. So these were called as Nikhandus. So Dhanvantari Nikhandu 9th, 10th century, Raja Nikhandu 17th century, Bhava Prakash Nikhandu 16th century, and this is very important for Dravya Guna. Then we have other influential texts that were created in the later period, like Yoga Ratnakara, 17th century CE. It is a practical compilation of many things that are useful for practitioner. Gada Nigraha in the 12th century, which is for disease management. Basava Rajyam in 18th century for Rasashastra. These are some examples of later textbooks. Then we have the traditions of commentators and scholars. Chakrabani Datta, 11th century, he wrote a commentary on Charaka Samhita called Ayurveda Deepika. Dalkhana in the 12th century wrote a commentary on Sushruta called Nibandha Sangraha. Aruna Datta in 13th century wrote the Sarvanga Sundara for Ashtanga Hridaya. Gayadasa in 11th to 12th century wrote a commentary on Madhava Nidar. So to understand the classical text, you also have to study some of these commentaries. So, for example, in the many texts are having unique contributions. Sharangadhara Samhita in 13th century describes respiration, telling even a term for oxygen, Ambara Piyusham, or the nectar of the air. So it says we are breathing to drink the nectar of air. So nectar of air can be compared to oxygen today. Then we have, for example, Bhela Samhita describes about circulation. The blood goes out of the heart and also comes back. We call it as rasa in Ayurveda. So circulation is an idea that we see very clearly mentioned in Bhela Samhita. Then we have Bhela Samhita, which talks about the vision. It says that vision is processed first in the eye and then in the brain. So it's called as Chakshur Vaisheshika Pitta, which is corresponding to retina first. The light rays fall on retina. Then there is Buddhir Vaisheshika Pitta, which is in the head region, which is processing this image based on signals received from retina. Today we know these details, but in those days, this is 3000 years ago, Bhela Samhita made this distinction. Mind. Bhela Samhita says mind is in the region of the brain, not in the heart. So this is also very interesting that they knew. So this shows the richness. You have to study many textbooks of Ayurveda to get the complete picture. So many things are scattered across different textbooks. Then many of the old textbooks also talk about microscopic organisms, so that microbes were not unknown to Ayurveda. They knew it, but they couldn't describe exactly, differentiate bacteria, virus, but they knew that microscopic organism existed and this could cause disease. They knew that there are harmless microbes and also harmful microbes. Then we have genetic transmission of diseases mentioned especially in the Charaka Samhita, where we say that the human body is coded in the reproductive elements, bija, bija bhaga, avayava, the seed, the part of the seed, part of the seed, every organ in the body is mapped in, just like genetic mapping, genomics. And if any particular part of the reproductive element of the father or mother is damaged, that particular organ in the child will also get damaged. So this is like something like genome, chromosome, and gene. So these ideas also were there in ancient times. Then we have Ayurveda in the medieval and colonial periods. Towards modern time, regional schools, commentarial tradition. Unani influenced Ayurveda during Islamic rule. Then during colonialism, Ayurveda was suppressed, but in the rural regions, it continued to be practiced. So that is how Ayurveda has come into modern times. Then we had modern revivals. So this is the journey of Ayurveda in the modern time. 20th century was the time of modern revival. Arya Vaidyashala, Kottakkal made a big role in modernization of Ayurveda. Then in Banaras Hindu University, integration approach developed. Then in more modern times, Ayush Ministry has been established. New CCR, Central Council for Research in Ayurvedic Sciences, National Institute of Ayurveda, All India Institute of Ayurveda. And now the government is going to digital integration, clinical research, global recognition. So in modern time also, the history of Ayurveda is continuing to evolve. So Ayurveda evolved through myth, science, and scholarship. The core is preserved in Samhitas, Nigandus, and commentaries. And today it is becoming relevant in the domain of integrative health. How today our focus is how evidence-based Ayurveda can be integrated with modern medicine to create what is called as integrative health. So with that, we conclude our discussion. I have answered most of the questions. There's just one or two remaining. Uh, so the last two questions I will directly answer, that whether the cancer, psoriasis, diabetes are described in Ayurveda. Yes, diabetes was first described. It's called Madhumeha in Ayurveda, sweet urine, honey urine. Psoriasis was described as Kushta, a type of Kushta. Cancer was described as Arbuda. And they had their own management of treatment. Like diabetes could be managed in early stages, but one of the limitation of Ayurveda was lack of insulin and sudden control of blood sugar. Psoriasis, sudden suppression is not possible, but long-term treatment with Ayurveda can give better outcomes. And in cancer, we can give a lot of supportive care. In some types of cancers, early intervention can also give clinical results. So, yes, it was described. So, WHO does influence Ayurveda. Global Center for Traditional Medicine is established in India now. So through the WHO, the development of traditional medicine and Ayurveda is being greatly influenced, and India has become the center for it. Tibetan medicine also, there's another question about Tibetan medicine using Ayurvedic texts. Yes, many Tibetan textbooks, all Tibetan medicine is derived a lot from Ayurveda. Many Ayurvedic textbooks have been translated to Tibetan medicine. So you can look up the book of Bhagavan Das, who has translated a lot of Tibetan textbooks. So where did the people get this knowledge? Some intuition was there, but mostly observation, systematization, watching animal life, through pharmacognosy, observation. It's a combination of multiple methods called as pramanas, pratyaksha, anumana, shabda. They also used methods to acquire knowledge. It did not. Yeah, I answered all the questions mostly. One or two are remaining. So I will complete that, and it is also a little bit beyond my time now. So maybe one of the question that is there, is it possible to look at the world through the eye of elements? Is it something of the past? Yes, we can look at the world through the eye of elements. We have to understand these are all different lenses. Modern lens gives you some advantages. Traditional view also gives us some advantages. Both can be used, but you cannot say that we can. If you ask whether the elements concept Panchamabuddha is sufficient for everything, then it is no. But if you ask whether it can be used for some purposes, then yes, to give a holistic understanding, yes. So textbook of Agastya is from Siddha system. It is not part of the Ayurvedic tradition. It's all in Tamil. So his book is known as Agastya Vazhipadu. It is a Tamil name. So I think that's it. We have overshot the time, but I guess I have answered all the questions. I can see, yes.
Yes, I think you answered all the questions.
So there was a question about Buddhism. Buddhism influenced Ayurveda, especially there is a theory that it reduced the significance of surgery because of ahimsa. But Buddhism also helped Ayurveda evolve a lot. Some of the great Ayurvedic physicians are from Buddha tradition. Jivaka is a good example. So with that, let us conclude. Okay, thank you. I am leaving now.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Manohar. You can disconnect now, yes.